Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. You are tuning in to the Office of Indian Education, Indian Education Professional Development Program Talking Circle. Um, it, as you guys are all coming in, please drop where you're zooming in from. Say hello. It's nice to see you all again. Happy New Year. It's our first Talking Circle of the year. As folks are coming in, please make sure that your audio is working and your chat box is working, because we're going to have a really interactive, informative discussion today. So as we get going, I am going to review our disclaimer. This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises Incorporated. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred. So as I said before, we're gonna have a really fun talking circle today. So hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. It feels like it's been months since we last chatted in our last talking circle. We're gonna go through some reminders today before we pop into with our special guest today for PD PCS refresher training. And if we have time at the end, we're gonna go through a mid-year check-in, just checking how we're doing. What are some fun things we can share with each other and enhance our programs together. And then lastly, go over upcoming events. So as always, if you're new here, if you've already been here, Linda Brake is your PD program officer. Linda is not with us today. She is with us in spirits. But as always, we will share her contact information at the end if you have any questions for Linda. Also, if you are new here, my name is Doris Tinsley, and I will be your TA coach. I will be the one going through your talking circles throughout the year. So moving into our reminders, we just have a few reminders as we get into the new year, as the semester gets started, and things like that. And so going over our drawdown updates, according to our CFR, grantees must minimize the time elapsing between the transfer of funds from ED and a disbursement by the grantee, whether their payment is made by electronic fund transfer or issuance, or redemption of checks, warrants, or payment by other means. And so we always tell you all in our coaching calls or through our talking circles, to try to draw down quarterly at a minimum, but that is by no means a requirement. We actually encourage you to draw down monthly, but minimum, please be sure to remember to draw down quarterly to make sure that not only is your budget on top of it, and you guys are up to date with what you're doing, but also helps us on our end to better help you as your TA team and also as your program officers as well. And so here's our year-to-date expenditures. And so the yellow on the bars of the screen are the drawdown money. So that's the amount of money that you've already used. And the red, burgundy, maroon, however you interpret this color, is the money left to spend. And so the percentages you see on the top are the remaining amount of funds you have. And so if you have not made a quarterly drawdown this year or last year, we highly encourage you to do so. And we'll be updating these charts every talking circle, so you kind of have a visual of what's left to spend, what you have spent, what you have left to spend during your grant year as well. And if you have any questions about this, please reach out to your program officer. Going into our next reminder is attendance. OIE expects all grantees to attend events. And if you're unable to attend your talking circles or any other events we put on through our webinars, recordings are provided for each program and can be found on our YouTube channel or webpage under technical assistance. We ask that you always check and review what was missed. And the really cool thing about our YouTube channel is that even our programs have our own playlist. So you can research your program, and all of the videos just drop down for you by year. You can search through year, you can search through month. And if you're unable to attend, please plan for someone from your team to attend. Unless it's mandatory for project directors. And so we highly encourage you to get your team involved. If you're unable to be here with us, we would love to see a member of your team. Before we head into our next session, our next portion of our talking circles, is there any questions I missed in the chat? Any questions from our audience before we welcome our very special guests for our talking circle today? Okay, I don't see any.
Questions in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much, Olani.
Yeah.
And so today we have Amy, we have Sophia, and we have one other guest today from PDPCS to give us our refresher training. And so I'm going to turn it over to our guest today. And I encourage you all to please pop your questions in the chat because there'll be time for Q&A. And then if there's anything you may need from us during the time, technically, please just let us know if things are you can't hear or you need some assistance. And so, Amy, I will turn it over to you.
Hello, thank you all so much for joining us. Sophia and I are so happy to be here today to talk to you about the PDP DCS and do our annual refresher training. So everyone on here, I would think are grantees that have had grants now for a couple years, or you might be brand new project directors as well, or secondary users. This is really meant more for those who have familiarity and have been using the system. I do want to mention we have a comprehensive training coming up on January 25th that please encourage any new grant staff. If you have new secondary users or at your university, there's a new project director who just started, please offer them and remind them to join that one. And you all are welcome to join that as well. You will hear a lot of the same information we're providing here and probably more. Oh, it's the 23rd. Is it? Are you sure? I just checked the calendar a second ago. I think it's the 25th, Sophia. We will confirm that, but all of you should have gotten an email from us with the information about this training and the comprehensive training, and we'll send out reminders about those two coming up. And just, yeah, please put any questions that come to mind in the chat, and we will pause also throughout to take any questions and have some discussion as well at the end. And Sophia is going to kick things off.
Thanks, Amy. I did just double check. So the comprehensive is the 23rd. It's Tuesday, the 23rd. Yes. Okay. So on today's agenda for the refresher training, we wanted to review and give a demonstration of the PDP DCS. So that's the Personnel Development Program Data Collection System. That's what the website is called. We're going to go over the required actions for this data submission. We'll also discuss protecting your participant data, as well as addressing a couple of frequently asked questions about the system. And at the end, we'll share some resources that are available to you and your participants, and we'll show you where to find them. All right, and so we just wanted to briefly go over the purposes of the PDP DCS. So on the grantee side, this is intended for you to be able to comply with the regulatory requirements and to be able to track the participant training and payback information. So you'll be using as you guys know, you'll be using the system to track funding, as well as any other information that's required to track the participants. Couple of important points here is that the data that's submitted in the system is used to supplement the annual performance report. And this is important because it will inform the OIE of the progress on your grant, and it'll affect the continuation of award decisions. It's also a repository for the data used by the federal government to report overall performance of the PDP program. So the PDP DCS data collection. So this is the information that the system gathers. The data collection period will be from February 1st, and it will begin on February 1st and it'll end March 31st. All participant data must be updated by the end of the data collection period. And I also just want to mention, this is just the period in which we're doing the data collection, but you're able to enter information throughout the year. So ideally, you should be updating participant accounts as they receive funding. You want to make sure to keep up with any changes that occur to the participant information. So you should not be waiting just until this data collection period to update. We want to briefly go over what the data collection process looks like. So it begins with grantees and participants completing the service payback agreement. So that's the first step that's taken before adding somebody into the system. This is where, after you've gotten a signed agreement, you'll enter the data for the participants in the PDP DCS. Once they reach the point in which they need to be exited from the program, they'll either be exited as graduated or completed, or exited prior to completion. And so there's sort of two paths that can be taken from here. If the participant graduates and completes the program, they'll receive a 12-month grace period. And from there, they can, once you've updated their profile and submitted it in the system, they'll be able to begin fulfilling their payback obligation by entering their employment. So they'll go in, submit their employment in the information, and their employer will receive a request for verification. Once their employer accesses that request and verifies it, that's when their service obligation status will update in their profile. And we do ask participants to log in and submit their employment for verification every 6 months. In the event where a participant has been exited and has not either logged in, submitted their employment, or gotten their employment verified, they'll be considered not in compliance, and they will be either referred for repayment, or their status will change to a repayment status. But before that happens, our team does reach out. We ask them to enter in any information that they may have in regards to their employment. But that's what happens if they don't submit any updates or employment for verification. Okay, so now we want to go over the actions that you'll need to complete during the data collection process. So this year we have 6 steps. So the first step would be to log into the PDP DCS, add and review a secondary user. The second step would be creating records for any newly funded participants. And this is for any ongoing grants. You'll update funding amounts and service owed for participants that are still enrolled. Step number 4 is, if the grant has ended, you'll ensure that there are no scholars listed as enrolled and are either graduated or completed or exited without completion. Step number 5 is to contact all participants with a status of awaiting login or fulfillment not in progress. And step number 6 is to review and submit all your data by the March 31st deadline. Okay, so step number 1 is logging into the system and review the secondary users that are assigned to your grant. So you can do this by, after you log in, you'll want to navigate to the grant profile summary for the specific grant that you need to update. For any multiple grant users, you'll have a couple of grant profile summaries. You can determine which grant it is by looking at the grant award number. So as you can see in the screenshot here, it says Test B100. You will have a grant profile summary for each grant that you have. And again, this is just for grantees who have multiple grants. There's a column that has secondary user, and that's where you'll see if you have a secondary user associated to your grant. You can have up to 2 secondary users. And it's not required. It's just to aid in the submission of data throughout the year for the participants. If you need to add a secondary user, you can send an email to the payback-obligations@ed.gov inbox, and we'll add them. Just make sure you include all the grant numbers that this person needs to be added to. Okay, and then the second step is creating a new participant record using the digital service payback agreement. So both options are still available, but we highly recommend using the digital version just because we're moving towards using these a little bit more because it makes it easier on both the grantee and the scholar to sign the participant agreements and to get them back in a timely manner. And then we wanted to go ahead and demo this for you. So I'm going to try and share my screen. Am I able to do that, Doris?
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button, but yes, you should be able to.
Okay. Let me. All right. Hopefully everyone is able to see my screen. All right. So once you're logged in, your account should look something like this. So again, there should be a grant profile summary where you can see the grant award number, secondary user, project director. There's also a section called grant personnel where you'll see
Sophia?
everyone. Sorry.
Sorry, can you zoom in a bit more? It's
Yes.
a little hard to read. Not that we have to read every single word, but
How's that?
I think that's better. Let us know if anyone needs that. Yeah, that's better.
Better? Okay. So you'll be able to see the grant personnel, and then there's participant information. And so this is where you'll be able to add any new participants, as well as accessing all the participant records and pending and approved service payback agreements. So again, you can double check the grant by looking at the grant award number that's in the same gray box. So to initiate a digital agreement, you'll click add new service payback agreement, and then in parentheses, it has digital version. So we'll click that. And then you're asked to put in the social security number. So once you enter this in and you click check if participant already exists, what'll happen is if the participant has already received like another grant from this program, certain information will pre-populate. In the event that they do not, it'll be a blank profile. So I'll show you what that looks like here. All right, so you'll see the service payback agreement. Right at the top, it'll have the grant award number. These are drop downs. If you click this, it'll show the paperwork burden statement. It'll drop down as well as the Privacy Act notice. But this is where you'll be prompted to enter the identifying information. Everything with a red asterisk is what's required to be entered into the system. So first name, last name, email address. Something to note here is that we ask that you do not use a university email address when you're entering the primary email address. The reason for this is that we want to participants to be able to access any emails that we're sending out. So like reminders when they graduate or anything that gives them access. University emails have a tendency to close access after the person has graduated. So a personal email address is always best to use when creating the profile. Again, required fields are the permanent address. And so you'll be prompted to fill out all of this information. The grant information should be pre-populated. So your school, the grant award number, the project title, and then the project director's name. And then you'll be prompted to enter the date of the service payback meeting that was held. And you're asked to enter the estimated total amount of training months, as well as the estimated total amount of funds and support. And this section here shows what the requirements are for the participant, and they're able to see this when they access this digital agreement as well. So once you've filled this portion out, you should be able to click submit for review. Save for later should only be used in the event where you don't have all the information when you're creating this digital agreement. And the reason for that is it's just should be used mostly in cases where you don't have all the information. When you do, please make sure you click save for submit for review, because that's what fully submits the profile into the system and gives the scholar access to view the information that you submitted for them. So save for later, we'll put it in a pending status. And again, should only be used in the event where you need to come back and update this. All right, so I think we can navigate to the next slide. Okay, so step number 3 is updating the funding and service amounts. So this is done in section H of the profile. It's called service payback information. So you will have entered this in. If you use the digital agreement, you will have entered the estimated total amount. You can, if that information changes as you move forward with the participant, you can still update it here. So say you initially entered in like 8 months, the way that the screenshot shows. If that changes to 10 or 12 months, you can do that. You can update it here. This is also where you'll keep track of the training costs that are associated to each expense. You're going to want to, it does have it as a total number, so you will have to like add. It does not do it automatically. But if you have additional funding for tuition, stipend, dependent allowance, or any other type of expense, this is where you'll put it in. So, sorry, let me pull that up here. Okay, so I just gonna share my screen again. Yes. Okay. So I want to look at a record that's already created for an enrolled scholar. So as you guys know, you can navigate to the view all participant records underneath the appropriate grant by clicking view all participant records. And so here is where you'll be able to access the individual records for each participant. Let's go into the enrolled scholar here. And again, this information should already be filled out. What we're looking for is section H. And this is where you'll be able to enter it in. So if you have additional funding, say they received an additional $100, you'll add it. And it should total up at the bottom. Once you've updated the necessary information, the Save for Later button will be gone after you've saved and submitted the scholar completely. So you'll just click Save and Submit. And it should bring you back to, it should bring you back to the View All Scholars page. So I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so step number 4, exit all scholars for grants that have ended. So this is more so for all the FY 2018 grants that have not received a no-cost extension. The majority of them have ended on September 30th of 2023. So if you are an FY 2018 grant and your end date was September 30th of 2023, you'll need to exit all participants. So, you can check what your grant end date is. Again, in the grant profile summary, there's a start date and an end date. And so that's where you'll be able to determine if you don't know if your grant has ended or not. Next slide. Yep. So you'll need to update section G, the participant status, to either the participant has completed the training or the participant has exited project training prior to completion. Sections H through J will need to be updated and completed before you select Save and Submit with that exited status. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually no demo for this one. But if there are any questions regarding how to exit the scholars, just pop them in the chat and we'll go over that. Okay, and then the next portion is contacting participants that are awaiting login or fulfillment not in progress. So I am going to share my screen again. I wanted to show you guys. So there's a snapshot when you're viewing the information for the grant. You can see record entry status, program completion status, and participant payback status. So you can also use this in the prior step for anyone that needs to exit Scholars. At a snapshot, you can see here how many scholars you have, participants you have listed as enrolled, as well as those in a leave of absence. When a grant ends, you should have no participants listed as enrolled or on a leave of absence. This just gives you the total number that are in each category. But again, if you go to the view all participant records, you can see exactly which participants are listed in a particular status. So if we're using this as an example, we can see that like TG test is already graduated or completed. But they are in that awaiting login status. So here's where you can see what specific status and which, this is where you can determine what type of notification each participant should receive. So in regards to the participants that are awaiting login or fulfillment not in progress, again, we can see the snapshot here. And when we go to view all scholars, we can see exactly who that is. So what these different statuses mean. Awaiting login is any participant who has not logged into the system at all. We want to make sure that they are receiving our emails, but also that they're actively logging in and submitting their employment if they have it. This also goes for the participants that are listed as fulfillment not in progress. This means that they have logged into the system, but have not submitted any employment. And so we're asking that you reach out to these two groups in particular to make sure that they are abiding by the regulations and submitting their employment for verification. All right. And I think we get, all right. So reminders for the participants. So when you contact them, you want to let them know that they are the ones that are responsible for ensuring that their submitted employment gets reviewed and verified by their employer. What this means is they're in charge of creating the employment record and then following up with their employer. So the employers have 30 days from the time in which they receive the request to access it and complete it. If it goes beyond that, it'll need to be resent, but we do ask scholars to keep track of whether it was verified or not. The system does send an email to them once it has been verified. So if they haven't received that email, that's sort of a clue for them to know that it has not been accessed or verified. Any participants who do not have their employment verified by the time their service payback must be fulfilled will be referred to the Accounts Receivable and Bank Management Division for cash payback. And again, this doesn't happen without any notification from us first. So they will be contacted and asked if they have employment, but we don't want it to get to a point where this is what happens. We want to make sure that they're actively logging in as they should be and submitting their employment and getting it verified. And then step number 6 is really just to review and make sure that you've submitted all the required data in a timely manner. So this would be by the deadline, which is March 31st. And that falls on a Sunday. So it may be best to have it in by Friday, but you do have until that 31st. And then we just sort of want to go over what timely submission means and why it's important. So the timely submission of the report is one of the factors that the secretary will consider in determining whether to continue your project's funding for the next fiscal year. So it's important that you're submitting data when you in the required timeframes. So something I did forget to mention earlier is that when a participant has been exited from the program, so when they graduate or if they've exited without completion, please make sure that you are logging into the system and submitting their exit information within 30 days of their exit. This is important in particular for participants who are already employed, because failure on your part to update their record will prevent them from being able to submit any employment. They're not able to submit employment until they've been fully exited in the system. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, the time frame for that is 30 days. 30 days from exit or graduation is when you should be exiting them in the system. So, and then the secretary can consider the failure to submit participant data in a timely fashion in determining your project's ability to obtain future grants from the Office of Indian Education or any other department program. So super important, timely submission. Make sure you're updating as you should be in the required timeframes. All right, and then I'm going to hand it off to Amy, and she's going to discuss avoiding security incidents.
Thanks, Sophia. And I'll just pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions or comments you want to come off mute to ask or share, or I don't think anything's come into the chat. I've been keeping an eye on that. I'll just give folks a chance before we move on. Okay, well,
Hi,
feel free-
hi,
Oh,
it's
yes.
Renuka here. I have a quick question.
Sure.
I have a student, a participant, who has not responded to any letters, anything. She has not enrolled, I mean, in any of the courses. Now, this is from the 2018 grant. We do have a no-cost extension, and that's gonna end soon as well. What do I do in this case with this particular student? Do I still have to send her a letter? And like, she won't be able to finish because you know, she's got behind in a lot of her studies.
So did she enroll and actually attend any of the classes, or?
Not since last summer. And
So she
she
kind of like disappeared.
yeah, she just kind of disappeared. Yes.
Okay. I think
mhm. I met
you-
with her and with our chair, and anyway, that was that. So since last summer, there's been no contact.
you would probably want to go ahead and exit her without completion. It sounds like I don't know how the university handles it, if you treat her kind of as like she's dropped out, left the program, kind of what your policy is with the university. But if it's been that long with no response and she's not enrolled in classes, I think for the purposes of our system, you would put her in there basically as exiting prior to completing the program. And
Okay.
then our system will send an email letting her know you've been exited out in the system. At this point, she still can fulfill her obligation through service if she's working in eligible employment. So she has that opportunity. And then if it, comes down the line, we're past, that 12-month grace period, she hasn't put in her employment, then as Sophia talked about, we would kind of get into more of that process of potentially having to refer her for cash repayment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what I was just wondering whether I should still write her a letter and give her 30 days to respond, because really, even if I exit her, she can still continue. I mean, she won't be a part of the program. She can
wouldn't
take
get
the rest
funding,
of the,
but she would.
and, yeah, she wouldn't have funding, but she could still continue and get her degree, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
that's up to the university, right? If that,
Mhm.
how that
Yeah.
works. I mean, we can talk more specifically about, your grant and your participant, and maybe see what Linda, the project office,
Mhm.
thinks too, but
Yeah.
kind of up to you. I would say at this point, like, if you've reached out a number of times and it's been that long,
Uh-huh.
it might be time. And we can always, if something changes, like that's not set in stone. If she does
Yeah.
kind of all of a sudden say like, wait, I'm here, and you do give her more funding or whatever ends up happening, we
Yeah.
can certainly make changes in the system to reflect that. So
Okay,
nothing's
because that would mean another no cost extension. I don't know where, I mean, the funding part of it just yet, because I'm just talking now. Should I stay back and talk to one of you after this, or should I write to Linda directly about this?
we can see, I mean, if there's time, after this, we certainly, Sophia and or I can talk to you. We can contact you, after this,
Yeah.
to talk further. So why
Yeah,
don't we do that?
I'll hang back after this and then see whether we can just chat for about 10 minutes. That's it. Okay. Thank
Okay.
you so much, Amy.
Of course.
Okay.
I'm sure others have encountered similar issues with participants maybe that have sort of vanished and can't really track them down and not quite sure how to handle them. So it's a good question. Anyone else have other questions right now? So if not, we wanted just to remind you all about the importance of protecting the personally identifiable information that you all are entering into the system and the participants are entering. When we say personally identifiable information or PII, what we're talking about is social security number for sure, as well as, address, date of birth, all of that information in combination with a name can, lead you to identify exactly who that person is. And we don't want that information, getting out of the system. So we take a lot of precautions and have a lot of security measures that are built into the system. And we rely on you all, grantees, to also be very, very careful and make sure that we're not exposing any of the participants' PII. And a couple ways that it can happen is one, and this is really more when you're using that PDF version of the service payback agreement that you upload. And this is a big reason that we started the digital agreements and are really very much encouraging you to use the digital agreements now moving forward and not use the PDF that you upload, because sometimes we have definitely had issues where a participant calls us and says, hey, I looked at my service payback agreement and it's not mine, it's actually somebody else's, and I can see their social security number and their address and all that information. So that's a security incident if that does happen. Also, we've had situations where grantees and participants have emailed the help desk PII that's been unencrypted. That's definitely a problem. In fact, this morning I saw something come through with, I think it was a participant who had emailed their social security number unencrypted. So we definitely want to avoid all of those types of situations as much as possible. And on the next slide, we can kind of get into a little bit about what that means if there is one of those security incidents and what the impact is, in particular on the Department of Education. When we realize it's happened, being notified by a grantee or a participant, or we see it when we're in the system, we have to immediately notify the department's Security Operations Center and complete a report documenting the incident. We have to do whatever we can to either from the PDP DCS remove that file, that information that shouldn't be there. And if it's via email, we have to expunge that email from the servers. But there also might be additional interviews, investigations that come about depending on, if someone else actually, sometimes we catch these and we don't believe anyone has actually viewed the PII. It's just that it's now, accessible or viewable by others that shouldn't have it versus, we actually know that someone has seen this. So that can kind of vary. And then we also have to take the step of looking through all of the participants in your grant just to make sure that that was a one-off, hopefully, and isn't something that happened, over and over again with more than that one participant. And if it did, we have to, clean that up with you. So there's a lot that happens if, these little kind of mistakes, which we know are mistakes and unintentional, but have to really be diligent about trying to prevent these as much as possible. Here also talking about, what kind of the impact will be on you as the project director, the grantee. If these types of things happen, you'll obviously have to, resubmit the correct documentation and also contribute to the security incident report. There's a training that we require project directors and secondary users to participate in related to security and proper handling of PII that you would have to undertake. And then also we let the Office of Indian Education know when this happens. And it's possible, if there's several of these incidents, that the grant and the university could be placed on high risk status, and that could have an impact on whether you can receive future federal funding. So for a lot of reasons, want to be very careful when it comes to handling PII. So a few ways that we recommend to avoid these situations. One is, like we mentioned, using that digital service payback agreement. That way there isn't a PDF kind of floating around out there being emailed, could be emailed to the wrong person, could be uploaded to the wrong participant record. It's all embedded in the system and there isn't that same risk. And then if you are communicating with help desk and need to provide any PII, if you need to send a social security number for some reason, or participants need to send us, if they're want to do a name change, sending us a picture of their driver's license or their marriage license, that should all be encrypted when it gets sent and password protected to help desk. And we do have, Sophia, if maybe you could pop in the chat, we have several resources on our website that specifically walk you through, if you don't know how to encrypt a file, step by step, how you can do that. Because I know that's not something everyone does all the time. So, but please make sure that you are following those directions. So now we're going to get into some of the frequently asked questions that we receive from grantees about submitting data and other requirements that you have. Want to just remind you and go over again what Sophia mentioned, getting into, as a grantee, well, how often should I really be going into the system and making these updates? We have this data collection period, and that the purpose of it really is just to ensure that everything from the past year, all of your data are up to date, but you absolutely should not be waiting until that data collection period to go into the system. It should be happening throughout the year because it impacts your participants. As Sophia said, if a participant graduates or exits prior to completion, they can't go in and start entering their employment information to work off their payback until you've gone in and changed their status in the system as being graduated or exited. So within 30 days of that type of a status change, also within 30 days of enrolling the participant into the program, because we want them to, as soon as possible, be going in, looking at their information. So it's always very transparent. They can see how much funding they've received, how much accumulated academic years of funding they're going to owe, all of that, and make any updates as well to their contact information that might be needed. And then, of course, at the end of your grant's fiscal year, within 30 days, making sure all of that, information in terms of the amount of funding that they've received gets updated, and any, contact information updates, just really kind of walking through that whole participant record that we looked at and just making sure that everything on there is updated and making any updates as needed. We do sometimes, get questions from, new grant personnel or participants or employers who are like, we've never gotten any emails and don't know what you're talking about. Please make sure that you are letting your participants know at the beginning, reminding them throughout their time in the program, and once they have graduated, to always be on the lookout for emails from us at paybackobligations@ed.gov. They should, add us to their contact list, make sure things aren't checking their spam, make sure they're not ending up there. As Sophia mentioned too, it's really important that you are putting in a non-university email for the participants, because while that might work while they're enrolled in the program, we still need to keep in touch with them once they've left the program and are working, and they may have lost access to their university email at that point. So that makes it really challenging, because email is definitely our primary mode of communication with you all and with the participants. It's good to add a secondary user if you have somebody working at the university with you, because as you all know, as project directors, there is quite a bit of data entry that you have to do for your participants, and it's nice to have that extra person who can jump in and is able to access the system and do some of that data entry. You can have up to 2 secondary users that can access the system for your grant. Each user is given unique login information. Everyone goes in using their own email address and password. You should not be sharing your email and password with anybody else to log in. If you have those individuals that are helping out, they need to have their own access. We do make sure to include secondary users on the reminder emails and the notifications that we send out from PDP DCS, so they're aware of what is happening and events and resources and those sorts of things as well. So it's so important that you know, from the get-go and throughout their time enrolled in the program, and when they're about to graduate from the program, that you're really clear with them what their payback obligation is, because we definitely get questions, as do, I would imagine, you all from your participants, that I didn't realize I had to work in a school that, you know, a district that has a high proportion of Native students. You might have told them at the beginning, and maybe they, you know, forgot, or, you know, it's been a while and they kind of are now into different things, or their situation has changed. So we really rely on you to make sure, you know, at least every year you're kind of reminding them and making sure that they understand what the requirements are. So they have to agree, you know, when they're accepting the funding, that they will do these things, which is they have to log into the system and submit their employment information. It needs to be verified by their employer in order for them to get their credit towards fulfilling their obligation. They should be going in, we would like for them to go in every 6 months, at least annually. They can really go in as frequently as they want, if they want to make sure they're continuing to kind of accrue that service, and they see that number going up in terms of the amount of time they fulfill. They can go in, you know, every 3 months if they want. Their employers might be slightly annoyed if they're getting like a verification constantly, but, you know, the more they go in, the better for everyone, really. And as we said too, that participants cannot fulfill their obligation until they have completed or exited the program. So let's say they are working in a district that serves a high proportion of Native students, and they've been working there even while they're enrolled in the program, and they continue on maybe once they've graduated. The time that they were working while they were enrolled in the program cannot be used towards fulfilling their service payback. It's only once they have graduated or exited that they can begin accruing that time to fulfill. Okay, just checking if there's anything that came in on the chat. And I think this is probably going to be an area that folks have questions and want to maybe talk about more, which is what is considered eligible employment. And because the regulations changed, the answer depends on what year the participant what grant year the participant was funded under. So for grants that were funded in FY 2017, and I don't think none of the active grants, you all that are on here with active grants would have grants that were funded in FY 17. Maybe you have other grants that are those FY 17 or earlier. But they fall under the older regulations before they were amended, and they must be working in a field of study, in their field of study under the PDP program, and it must be benefiting Indian students. Those are the two elements for those older grants. Then when the regulations were amended, kind of added on this piece that it has to be in an LEA that serves a high proportion of Indian students. So just want to be very clear on that definition, which would apply to probably really everyone on this call and your participants. Sophia popped in the chat a link to one of our frequently asked questions, which is number 16, sorry. I'm getting my dates and numbers all screwed up today. And you'll see kind of a side-by-side for the older regulations, and then for you all in the FY 2018 grants and forward, what is considered eligible employment and how to determine that for you and your participants. So please, look at that. You all should be familiar with this change and what it means, and just make sure your participants, are as well. So when you might be thinking, or when someone first hears this, well, what does that mean that an LEA serves a high proportion of Indian students? How is that defined? So it means that your participant could be working in a district or LEA that includes BIE funded schools that serves a high proportion of Indian students in that LEA compared to all other LEAs, all the LEAs in the state. So that's one way. If they're working in a school, in a district, and that district meets that criteria of serving a higher proportion of Native students, when you look at the state as a whole, then that meets the criteria. Another way is, let's say that a student is in a school, or their district overall, let's say, doesn't serve a high enough proportion of Indian students when compared to all other LEAs in the state, but the particular school they are in does. That would also be considered eligible employment. So there's a couple different avenues for that. And it looks like Sophia, thank you, kind of put in the chat itself a little picture, or I don't know how she did that, to the actual FAQ, so you can pop it right open. Hopefully you all have seen and are aware of, and Sophia, maybe if you could put the links to these in the chat too. These are lists that we pulled together so that you and your participants would hopefully be able to somewhat easily determine, does my district meet the eligibility criteria? We have one list that is based on Title VI student counts, and then another using the Common Core of Data Universe survey data from NCES, National Center for Education Statistics. You can look at either of those lists, and if it meets the criteria under either, then that works. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Got that link put in there. And then a third way is, again, talking about, so those two lists that are posted on OIE's website are the district data. But if, like we talked about, let's say the district that the student is in doesn't meet the criteria, but the school they are in does, using the NCES, National Center for Education Statistics public school search, you can then determine if your school, what proportion of Native students your school is serving, and compare that to what we have in these other two lists for the LEA average for the state, and see if you meet the criteria that way. I know there's kind of a lot of if this, then that, different lists. We are in the process, Sophia and I have put together instructions, guidance that we're hoping to post on the PDP DCS website very soon. It just has to go through Office of Indian Ed review, which kind of takes your participants really step by step of how to search these lists and the different ways that they can be looking for their school or district and seeing if they meet the criteria. I'm gonna just pop open one of these lists just to show you all what they look like and sort of how to use them. Let me share my screen. Okay, are you all seeing the PDF? So this, I think, is the Title VI data. Yep, you can see at the top. So we have it organized by state and alphabetical by state. So here we'll see Alabama, and in order to determine the LEA average percentage of American Indian Alaska Native students, we used the Common Core of data. So using the Common Core of data, on average, across all of the districts in Alabama, 12.28% of the students are American Indian Alaska Native. Then if we look using the Title VI data that gets reported to the department, and we know not all districts receive Title VI funding, so you're not going to see all districts listed here, but for the ones that we do have data for, you would then compare the percentage based on their Title VI count of students, how that compares to that 12.28. So if we look down here, like Washington County School District, they're at 23.96%. That's higher than the 12.28. So that is considered, you know, an eligible LEA. Looking above, the Porch Band Creek Indians, also Monroe County Public Schools, those are lower than that 12.28%. So they would not be considered eligible. And the other list looks very similar to the one I just showed, set up the same way, where you have to kind of go to the very top of the first page for each state to get that state LEA average, and you're comparing that number to your district that would be listed, you know, within that state. Does anyone have any questions about that? Like I said, we're hoping to put out some straightforward kind of guidance and instructions on using these lists that we hope will help alleviate maybe some of the questions and confusion. But we know it's hard when there's a change, and want to make sure we're supporting you and the participants as best we can to understand and make sure we're entering in accurate and eligible employment information.
Amy,
Yes.
this is Kelly Brame with Choctaw Nation. I do have a question. I feel like my questions are going to probably be addressed at the end as well, but there may be some other grantees that are in similar situations. So whenever we applied for the grant itself for the FY21 funding, and I tried to go back and look for that original webinar, because when we were applying the original list that had been provided to us, because during FY18, there wasn't a clear definition. And so at that time, there wasn't a list because there wasn't a clear definition on that percentage. We were excited as far as on FY21, okay, clear definition, this is how we're moving forward. And then the list that had been provided at that time was the FY18. So we, you know, and from what I remember, grantees, we were encouraged to utilize that list whenever we were advertising this and recruiting students to our projects. What we've recently noticed is when you do a comparison between the two lists, we may have a situation where a school was on the FY18 list. However, on the FY21 list, that school may have fell below the percentage. what are we to do in that situation? Because students, whenever they originally applied, they were basing their schools kind of geographically. And then if it was on the FY18 list, then it was like, okay, I'm good. These schools are within driving distance of my home. So can we use both lists? I mean, I want to get some guidance on that because we've had this happen already. And where on one list, but not on the other.
Okay. Yes, that is a great question that we have posed to Linda and Donna and the program office at OIE. And I think it's something that they need to figure out and probably bring in the Office of General Counsel to make a decision on that. But we are definitely aware of that situation. And you may have already sent us, Kelly, kind of more of the specifics would be helpful too of, here's the district. I mean, we have the old list too, like on the 2018 list, they were at this percentage. Now on this new list, they're at this other percentage, just so we have that kind of concrete data to use. Okay, it is with OGC for review. Great. So
well, and like that, I appreciate it that it's under review, but if I've got a student already that is currently accepted, maybe a student teaching position, and we know that a lot of our participants, that's ultimately where they want to become employed whenever they're doing their student teaching. And so, and it's kind of, and what guidance do we provide with that? Because they have to make that determination as far as where they're going to do that student teaching well in advance because of the paperwork that is required by the university. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence as the grantee and that we're not putting any of our participants in a bind.
Yes, completely understand. And that is definitely a situation that I don't think, any of us would want participants to be in. And we will definitely, and I'm sure Synergy folks too, if it's on their radar, are continuing to bring this up and will, again, especially, after this conversation, that there is definitely an urgency to coming up with a resolution and decision about it. So don't worry, we are on it and we'll continue to push to get a decision.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. But like I said, if Kelly or others, Krista, if you have, I think OGC sometimes likes if we have like a concrete example of here's the particular issue, here's the data, rather than kind of like, well, this might come up, and that we know that it is coming up, but kind of those details are helpful.
Hi there, Amy. My name is Melina, and I'm newer and have an interim position at the University of Oregon Sapsaquala program. And we currently have, students that are starting their job searches that will be graduating in June. And there have been a few questions, about, specific schools or school districts. So I'm just wondering, particularly as I get trained up, who is the best contact to reach out to and ask, is this a school that, yes, a student could accept a position at, if it's not clear from the list? And again, because I'm new, I just want to make certain I'm giving the right advice.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say send it to us, our help desk, and we'll put that information up in a couple slides. Sophia's popping our email and our phone number into the chat. And then if we're not able to help resolve it, then we will bring it to Linda Brake, the project officer at OIE, and she will, be brought in to make a decision or help figure it out.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Any other questions, comments? We have a couple more slides to go through. Krista's comment about your state having increased. Yeah, I would expect though, if your state overall average increases, that was probably due to increases at the school level as well. So everyone might have kind of gone up. But yes, I think especially for districts that were like very close, to that state LEA average, a little change could take them off the list one year.
Yeah, that's our case. We have several school districts which are close to the university here where we have schools that probably are no longer on that list. So it does create somewhat of an issue for placement, typical placement.
Yep. Okay. If you want to move on to the next slide, here's just a list of, we get the question from grantees, we want to know when are participants hearing from you, under what circumstances, and here's a list of the times that we will send out email reminders, notifications to the participants. Obviously, when we're first getting them into the system, they're getting notified and getting emails when they're kind of going back and forth with you, completing the digital agreement. There's a lot of emails flying around. They also are notified once you in the system have set them to a graduated or exited prior to completion status. So they know, okay, now I can go in and start putting in my employment. We send out reminders to them when their grace period is about to end, and also when the service obligation fulfillment period is about to run out, to hopefully remind them to go in and be putting in their employment. They can request deferrals through the system and get notifications about decisions related to their deferral requests. When they're putting in their employment, there's emails going back and forth so they know if their employer has verified their employment or if they potentially dispute their employment. We're also reminding participants if they haven't logged into the system and it's been a year. And then the nice email that everyone likes to get, once they've fulfilled their service payback, they get an email saying, congratulations, you have fulfilled your payback. And then just a few resources that we wanted to point out to you that are available on the website, and these are available to everybody. You don't have to have a login to be able to access them. So even, participants who haven't gotten enrolled yet and don't have access to log into the system can still get to these. We will put a link to this training on our website from OIE's page where they will have it posted, and we have previous trainings posted there as well. Our frequently asked questions that Sophia put a link to is a very handy resource. Definitely, if you have a question or your participant does, I would say that's kind of the first place to go. And a lot of the questions we get are answered in there. We have instructions for multi-factor authentication, which all of you at this point should be using, but you can point your participants to it if they have questions or have trouble when they are first getting into the system. And then we have a few more resources too that we definitely recommend you take a look at. Some checklists, one that is really handy to use this time of year during our data collection period and kind of goes through many of those, same steps that Sophia talked you through, just to make sure you're kind of covering everything and taking care of all of the required pieces. If you're a grant that has closed, we have one to ensure that you're doing everything you need to wrap up your grant in the system at that time. Also information about service payback agreements and links to the regulations. And I think finally, we just have on here our help desk information. I'm sure all of you have probably contacted the help desk for one reason or another, and please continue to do so. We're available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday, via email or phone. And that pretty much wraps up the content that we had in terms of the data collection. We definitely are happy to take any other questions you have on anything we covered. And we also wanted to mention that we are in the process of redesigning the system. It's going to be a couple years until the new redesigned system is available. But while we are right now thinking about the new system and wanting to make it as user-friendly and functional for you all as grantees and for your participants, we really wanted to offer this opportunity if you have any feedback that you can provide that we would so greatly like to have while we're in this planning phase. Sophia popped a couple questions that we wanted to pose about that in the chat. But kind of before we get into that, I'll just wait and see if any other data collection or current system related questions.
Amy, this is Kelly again. Okay,
Yeah.
so we had a participant that went in and was trying to update their information, their employment information. They had recently graduated, and so she actually sent us a screenshot, and it may be something that's going to be addressed later. However, every option was required. So I'm just going to give you an example. It says, is this a full-time position? The student checked yes, that they are employed at a full-time position. The very next question, instead of it skipping down like 4B, because 4B says, is this a part-time position? Well, it's not, but she can't move forward. It's making her answer. It's not allowing her to submit her information because there's an asterisk beside it. So it indicates that it's a required response.
So you're saying this, making her respond both to if you're a full-time
Yes.
and if you're part-time.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So
Sophia,
that's on 4A and 4B.
we'll take a look at that. I don't know, have we heard, Sophia, of others or from this participant? Do you know, Kelly, if the participants reached out to the help desk about this?
I don't
specific-
know if she reached out to us.
What's
Okay.
her name?
What her
Or if
name
you
is,
wanna-
the student name is Aubrey Wallace.
Aubrey Wallace. I can double check, and like off the top of my head, it doesn't sound familiar. So I don't know that she's reached out, but I don't think I've heard this issue reported yet, Amy. No.
Okay, so Kelly, if you want to send us the
Mhm.
information or have the participant reach out to us, we'll definitely take a look at that.
Okay, so do you want me to send it directly to you as far as the TA email? Because I can forward it, or the payback obligation?
Yes, use the payback obligations
Okay.
at ed.gov.
I'll
Yep.
send it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It does look like a few folks are mentioning some issues that we are aware of related to participants who are funded under multiple grants, and that is something that we are working on. And I will say, with this redesign of our system, we definitely plan on making a priority that that information is functioning correctly and we're not running into some of these bugs that we have been. Carmelita mentioning maybe it's because they're doing payback in undergraduate while participating as enrolled in the graduate award. And yeah, I mean, it definitely is an issue with, we're seeing a few things with those participants who have been funded under more than one grant. And we're working on that. We do plan on having a few things fixed and moving over some of those changes in February. However, I don't know off the top of my head if all of these things that are being mentioned will be taken care of, but just all I can say is, thank you for letting us know and keeping reminding us, because we are definitely aware of it and are doing, what we can to fix it. I think the students in our program got signed up before the system was set up, and the pending has never gone away. So Nancy, if you have participants who are not funded under multiple grants and you're seeing kind of that pending status, please let us know. I'm not sure do you mean pending for their record entry status, like their record hasn't been submitted yet, or are you talking about pending for their payback status or something else?
It's not for their payback. They aren't finished yet,
Mhm.
but we brought them in right away. And before everybody else came in, these three got set up before it was set up. And they told me they would be pending. but now I kind of can't get them out of pending.
Uh,
So does that make sense to anybody?
I think so. So I don't know if you remember in the beginning, I was talking about the difference between the save for later button and the save and submit. If you're updating those accounts and you continue to press save for later, it's not allowing the system to fully submit that person's profile. And so they'll appear as pending if you continue using that save for later. So that's why it's super important to use save and submit once you've entered the information, because whatever you're entering into that profile, it will be saved, but it's not official. It's not official until you save and submit it into the system. So just based off what you're saying, it sounds like that's what the issue is. But if you give me like a grant number and the scholar names, I can look it up now and tell you, or you can send an email and I'll look into it further.
I'll send an email.
Okay.
And I think it mean it's on their end. I don't think it's on my end. So anyway, I'll send an email with their names.
And the grant number.
And the grant number. We'll do that.
Thank you. You have to hit submit. Yeah. Yeah, that's super important, is submitting.
I can enter their they're all updated in terms of what's been spent on them.
Do you get what I
Okay.
mean exactly there, Amy? This is Carmelita. I'm saying that if you don't hit save, then a ledger is not generated for that participant. You know, the ledger where we put in tuition, miscellaneous, you know, whatever, all the fees and stuff. If you don't hit submit, then you never get the ledger. So you must hit that in order to, you know, quantify your drawdowns into each participant's, you know, lane, if you will, for the lack of a better word. But yeah, so
I am hitting submit, and it is taking all of their, their payback obligation amounts are in there exactly as we've been tracking them. So maybe it's in the different column.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking maybe. I don't have it open in front of me, but I will email so somebody can follow up.
Sure.
I could share my screen real quick. This, if you're talking about here, there's entry status, and then payback obligation status. So you can see there's two different kinds of pendings. There's pending for entry status, and then there's pending for payback obligation status. Carmelita, this is the one where you're seeing pending here. That's the issue that's known for multiple grant recipients. When you see pending here in entry status, that's what we're talking about, where there's an issue where you're not submitting the information fully.
okay, good.
And then it should have like save and submit and save for later. So if you continue using this button, the status will continue being pending until you save and submit. So if you're
I think
seeing,
that's my problem. That is probably my problem, but I'll still send it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy and Sophia. If there aren't any more questions for Amy and Sophia, and if there are and you're just racking your brain, please reach out to them. They are an amazing resource and will always reach back out and help. But are there any last questions as we're reaching the top of our time today?
I do, if it's okay, want to put in a plug, and I'll put my email and Sophia's, our direct emails. So if you all could think about some of those questions that we asked related to a new system and kind of what are improvements you would like to see, please think about that and send us any feedback. And we'll probably at some point also have another kind of feedback focus group session. So if any of you are interested in being part of that or helping us as kind of user testing, in the future, let us know as well. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you guys for joining us today. It's always amazing to have, more clarification, more guidance for our participants and our project directors. And so as we are wrapping up, are there any further questions outside of PDCS? Are there any things you may need from us as your technical assistance team, or questions we can relay to Linda, since Linda was not able to be here with us today? If so, please pop those in the chat for us, or email them to either us, your technical assistance team, or to Linda herself. As we end up, and if there's any other additional resources you may need, we are going to launch our in-session feedback. As always, after the end of every talking circle, we just ask that you submit your confidential feedback on the usefulness of this webinar. We value your feedback, and we want to hear more from you and how we can help make these talking circles more beneficial and effective to your program. So as you're filling that out, we are going to go through just some upcoming events, some reminders, things for you to mark off on your calendar. And so APR due date is coming up. It's going to be March 29th, and our APR webinar is going to be February 22nd from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. And so please mark that on your calendar. Calendar invites will be sent out, but if you're anything like me, if it's not on a sticky note, if it's not in my calendar, it is out of my mind and out of my sight. And also, coming up at the end of February is our all product directors meeting. And so our theme this year is growing in sovereignty, and all product directors are required to attend this annual meeting. And so we also encourage you to register now. Our link is open, and that link will be dropped in the chat. And so the event has been virtual for the past 2 years, and we are really excited to provide this platform again. And this time you can invite your entire team. Normally grantees set aside funds for 2 people, but because it's virtual, we highly encourage you to invite your entire team, the folks that learn beside you and manage your programs with you. And so we encourage you to register as soon as possible, and more information will be shared regarding next year's product directors meeting as plans and decisions are made. And if you have any trouble registering or any questions about that link, as always, please email us and let us know, and we can help you get registered as well. Also, we have our student artist competition, and although this is perfect for our NAL ED grantees, we also encourage your participants to share this to their students, to their classes, to their classmates. If they have students in their classrooms that are in love with art, that want to draw and make videos of photography and dance and share their traditions as well. And so we highly encourage you to share them to your participants as they're going through either their trainings, their inductions, and they're getting into their job placements and meeting more students. Please share this so all students can have the opportunity to showcase their work. And so the all entries must be submitted online by March 8th. So we have a little over a month for our students and for our community members to participate. And those links will be dropped in the chat as well. So lastly, please connect with your OIE technical assistance team. That is myself, that is the other amazing people on the chat that has been assisting you today. We encourage you to schedule a coaching session with us as well if you need one-on-one support or you need a 1-hour sessions. We highly encourage you to use that. The best way to connect with us and get those sessions scheduled is through Calendly, and we will post that on our chat as well so you can grab it and save it. As always, it's the new year, things are changing. So if there are email updates, if there's any additions that you want to add to our listserv, please email us, and be sure to include your name, your role, and your email address. That will help us keep you informed, keep you in the loop, and things like such. And lastly, upcoming events. Like I said, if you have a sticky note, if you have a notebook next to you, if you have your phone, please input these dates so you do not forget them. Our next monthly office hour is January 25th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time. A reminder, it is the 4th Thursday of each month unless indicated otherwise. Our next PD Talking Circle will be March 13th. After that, May 8th, and then August 14th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And then again, please mark down your APR webinar as that date is coming up. And as always, just a quick reminder of the contact information to reach your program officer, Linda Brake. There's also our email address, also our website, and follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, for any updates, amazing stories that are happening in communities, and even grantee spotlights at times. And so if there aren't any questions in the chat, or if there is anything else you may need today, we want to thank you for dropping by for our refresher training with PDPCS. Thank you, Amy and Sophia, for the amazing content today and the clarification and just taking the time out with us. Happy New Year, everyone, and we are very excited to see what this year brings for us. Thank you.